Hi, I'm Bill McDonald of Charlotte County Libraries and History, and I'm an adult services librarian.
And I'm Crystal Diff, Program Coordinator with History Services.
And today we look at Charlotte County's historical homicides.
Yes, it's very exciting, so I hope you all are a little bit excited about this. This does have some mature content in it, so please be aware of that before you watch the rest of this video.
Absolutely. And would you like to start, because yours is more historic than mine. Mine takes place in the early 2000s, and yours probably takes place in the early 20s, maybe.
It's actually, this takes place in 1931. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background to the story so that you understand everything that's going on. I promise that you'll appreciate the story more with a lot of these details. So this is the story of the Bloody Bucket. It's a very infamous story in Charlotte County. I know for myself, I've used it in different programs like Chilling Tales, and so some of you may have heard this story before. So bear with me. This actually is about the Bloody Bucket, which was, from the census records, supposed to be a filling station or gas station and a supermarket. But it was really not known for being that in the area of Punta Gorda, off of the southeast corner of a Klein Road near US 41 and the railroad tracks. It was owned by George Mack McGraw and his wife Virginia Ma McGraw. And it was sometimes known as McGraw's Place or the Wine Place, and you'll find out why. They lived in the back quarters of this building, and so the front part of it, they had a kitchen, they had a bar. Ma was the bartender and shopkeep, and George was known as the bouncer. So he was pretty rough and tumble for that time. Now, there were some people that knew about the Bloody Bucket in town, and we've heard these stories through them. One of them is Harry Goulding. He was a bookkeeper for their shop, and he was a bookkeeper on the side for multiple establishments in town. He's very well known for his hibiscus hybridizations, so he's known as Mr. Hibiscus, and he also worked for the Punta Gorda Fish Company, so he's important as well. But this was not just a filling station. This was a time of Prohibition, so Charlotte County was supposed to be a dry county. Even before Prohibition happened, they were officially a dry county in Florida. They were known as DeSoto County at that point in time, prior to the establishment of Charlotte County in 1921, for which we're celebrating our centennial of this year. Now, Ma used to make moonshine. She would make it in the back. She had big just tubs, big barrels of moonshine in the back. And she had something for kids too, so don't fret. If you wanted moonshine and you were on the younger side, she could make it a little bit more palatable for you by adding some strawberry syrup. Now, they would get strawberry syrup from the pharmacy, actually, because they used it for medicine. So she would buy it from the pharmacy and add it to her moonshine and sell it to children, for which a lot of kind of funny stories take place, where people say that they would see the kids kind of puking their guts out after drinking Ma's strawberry wine that she had. So it's one of the reasons why it was known as the Wine Place. So it wasn't the most it wasn't the nicest place in town, and they weren't necessarily the most law-abiding citizens over there. They were making their own moonshine. Supposedly, Ma had some connections to get rum brought in from the Bahamas. This was also a big deal in the area. A lot of people were rum running in Charlotte County. We have places like Rum Runners Cove that are still named today. So this is where all of the railroad workers, late 1800s, early 1900s, we had a lot of construction going on, a lot of different industries. We had a lot of transient workers. People were following the railroad. So, as the railroad tracks were being laid, they would just follow that and just kind of work until the railroad stopped. So these were a lot of transient people, maybe not, again, the most law-abiding citizens either. We had lumberjacks, turpentine workers, so many different types of workers in that respect. So these were tough people, and mostly men. And they would end up wanting to find some place on the weekend after working very hard, and they would end up at the Bloody Bucket. It's named the Bloody Bucket because you have all of these guys showing up, getting drunk off of 140 proof moonshine, and having some fights, sometimes with knives or guns. So it was known to be a really rough place. So that's the background on our venue of this homicide. Now, on March 24th, 1931, at 7:30 p.m., so really not too late at night, not too dark, it said that they were assaulted. And I'm going to actually read one of the newspaper articles that came out for the events that took place. This is from the Fort Myers News Press on March 25th, the day after. So the man who supposedly assaulted them was named Joseph Eugene. And Joseph Eugene was a colored man. And at this point in time, there was a lot of segregation and a lot of racial tension at this time. So colored people didn't have the same rights. So a lot of people saw this as one of the biggest issues in this story. Now, Joseph Eugene, he attempted the holdup unassisted, according to Mrs. McGraw, who was the only witness of the shooting. Mrs. McGraw was at the front of the building when he entered, threatened her with his revolver, and ordered her to put up her hands. McGraw entered the store from the back, George McGraw, and he also was covered by the gun. Joseph ordered them into their bedroom behind the store, apparently with the intention of holding them there while he burglarized their establishment. McGraw, however, suddenly put down his hands, reached for a revolver under the pillow of his bed, and snatching it out, made ready to fire. Mrs. McGraw at the same time ran for the door. Eugene fired one shot at the woman, but the shot went wild. Turning on McGraw, Eugene emptied his pistol into the man's body before McGraw could fire, and then grabbing the storekeeper's revolver from his hand, emptied its contents into McGraw's body. 10 shots had entered McGraw's body. It was discovered at the coroner's inquest this morning. Now, there was a motorist who was a short distance away, and his name was A.H. Smith, and he was coming in from Pineland to go to the store and pick up some refreshments when he heard the shots and actually waved down another car, and they went into Punta Gorda to get the sheriff at the time. He was the first sheriff of Charlotte County, Mr. Sheriff Jim Lipscomb, and then they got sheriff and police to come to the scene after he heard all the shots that were fired. Now, Ma was the only witness to this event. She was completely unharmed through this whole thing. And again, there were 10 shots fired into George McGraw, but apparently only one pistol was found at the scene, plus the shotgun. Now, George, as he was going into the back room, he got to his gun rack and got his shotgun after being shot for 10 times, and shot Joseph Eugene in the back twice with the shotgun, killing him instantly. I'm not sure why he would shoot him in the back if he was, being faced with an assailant, but those are the reports. They didn't have a trial. There was nobody to put on trial. They were dead. So the sheriff decided to have an official coroner report and a coroner's inquest and jury to take place. And they found that the story that Ma had said was true, that George was shot 10 times and that he fired in self-defense, killing Joseph Eugene. Now, that's not the end of the story. So we have 2 men dead now. And George McGraw was buried at Indian Springs Cemetery a few days later. The official coroner report on George was that he died of gunshot wounds of assailant. So it doesn't say exactly how many times he was shot, but newspaper reports say that it was 10, which is too many bullets for just one revolver. And a lot of people in town just couldn't believe the story because they didn't see how there was any time to reload during that whole incident that was taking place. So now we have the town that's really looking into this, and they're really questioning Ma McGraw's version of how things happened and what took place. We have Joseph Eugene, which at the time, a lot of people just thought that he was a scapegoat, that they picked the first colored man that came into the shop that night, and she just decided to use him as a scapegoat for actually murdering her husband. Now, they don't think that she was alone in murdering George McGraw. She supposedly had a boyfriend. So, this boyfriend is one of my favorite characters in Charlotte County, one of my favorite people to talk about, Mr. Richard Dick Wyndham. He always pops up in all of these unsavory types of stories that we have in Charlotte County. He was actually one of the first Charlotte County commissioners, so he was actually pretty much well respected in town. Like, he had a really good position in town. He owned a livery service at one point in time, so he did pretty well for himself in town. But he was also implicated in another murder, that of Marshal John Bowman. But he was not charged with anything. He was just one of the suspects during that case. So everybody kind of started to turn towards thinking that, well, maybe Ma and Dick Wyndham decided to get rid of George so that they could live together. And all 3 of these people are unsavory characters. The McGraws, Dick Wyndham. But because, again, Joseph Eugene, he was just a black man. He was a common laborer. He wasn't from this town. Nobody knew who he was. Nobody could, vouch for him. Some say that he was on the bridge construction crew, which the Baron Collier Bridge was being built at that time and opened later that year. Others say that he was part of the Black Bottom crew of the Seaboard Railroad. So either way, he was a transient worker. Nobody knew who he was. But Mom went on to live her life. In 1932, Prohibition was repealed. She decided to turn her establishment into, a nicer establishment as a real restaurant and bar, and she renamed it the Alligator Bar, which does show up in stories like with A.C. Frizzell. That's where he met his second wife. Oh, wow. And then eventually she did sell it to a county commissioner. So some say that it was Dick Wyndham.
Oh, okay.
Dick Wyndham and Virginia McGraw get married in Lee County in 1946. So tying pieces of this story together with, maybe we don't have evidence to this, but a lot of the circumstances are just really in a gray area here. And also, somebody was remarking, Fred Quidno in town, another resident in Punta Gorda, was remarking that she said a week prior that, they would probably get robbed and the robber would never get away with it, and quote, either he'll die or we'll both die together. So she said that a week before the assault that took place at the Bloody Bucket. Virginia died just 2 years after getting married in 1948, and she was also buried in Indian Springs Cemetery. And Dick Wyndham died in 1953, and he's also buried at Indian Springs Cemetery. And he will forever be in between Virginia and George McGraw for eternity. He is buried right in the middle of the 2 of them at Indian Springs Cemetery.
That's fitting, isn't it?
Yes, yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, that is the story of the Bloody Bucket.
That is a fascinating story and very spirited. Mom McGraw, you
Yes.
didn't want to mess with her.
No.
So my story is a little bit updated into the new millennium, and I'd like to start out with a little riddle. What does a beauty queen, a software developer, a rock blues guitarist, a book by Anne Rule, a Lifetime movie, Hurricane, Charlie, and the Charlotte County Sheriff's Department all have in common? Unfortunately, it was a murder of a man named Russell Douglas in the state of Washington. In 2012, former Punta Gorda resident Jim Hooton was apprehended in Veracruz, Mexico, and brought to trial for Russell Douglas's murder. And he was tried and convicted, and he is currently serving 80 years. So how did this all happen? Let's go back to the beginning. Jim Hooton grew up in the state of Washington. He was very popular. He was student body president. He was on the football team. And he was very technical, and he, in fact, developed a software program and sold it to Microsoft for over $1 million. So wow. He and his wife moved from Washington to right here to sunny Punta Gorda to enjoy the sun and the fun. And here in Punta Gorda, Jim was well liked. He was voted Businessman of the Year, and he had a computer business. And he also played in a rock and roll band. They did rock, jazz, and blues. And when you talk about adult content, I'll give you the name of the band right now. They were called Buck Naked and the Exhibitionists.
Okay.
And they gigged all over Charlotte and Sarasota counties. One of their main stays was the Holiday Inn, the old Holiday Inn. Jim flew, as I said, he grew up in Washington. He flew back to Washington to attend a funeral, and he became reacquainted with a woman named Peggy Sue Thomas. Peggy Sue is a very statuesque brunette. She's about 6 feet tall. She won a few beauty contests. She worked as an aircraft mechanic in the service. She also studied and became a beautician. She played on a men's basketball team, and she was also a glamorous limousine driver in Las Vegas. So
very talented.
Very talented and very eclectic person. Yeah. So they're both charismatic and very attractive, engaging people. They started a whirlwind romance, and of course Jim was still married, his wife still living in Punta Gorda, and so he would fly up and visit Peggy Sue in Las Vegas. She was working as a limousine driver. Peggy Sue later moves back to Washington, and she befriends a person by the name of Brenna Douglas, and Brenna is her boss. Brenna owns a beauty salon, and Peggy Sue is working as a hairstylist and beautician. Brenna Douglas tells Peggy Sue that her husband, Russell Douglas, that they're soon to be separated and getting a divorce, and she accuses Russell of abusing her. Now, there was no evidence of this abuse. No police report was ever filed. No neighbor where they lived in Whidbey Island, Washington, in Puget Sound, ever heard a complaint or a loud noise. So Peggy Sue convinces Jim to come up and visit her in Washington, and they convince Brenna's husband, Russell, to meet them on a deserted road the night before Christmas, and this is in 2003, and under the guise of that Peggy Sue has a gift that she wants to give to Brenna. Now, why she didn't just put the Christmas gift under their Christmas tree. Why are you giving it to the husband to give to the wife when it's a gift to her? On
a deserted road.
On a deserted road at night. And anyway, Russell unfortunately makes the worst decision of his life and agrees to meet them there. 2 days after Christmas, they discover Russell Douglas's body. He was in his car and he was shot point blank through the nose. And they really didn't have a suspect, and the case started to go cold. And this, of course, was, as I said, right around Christmas of 2003. Well, 2004 rolls around, and right around July of 2004, the authorities in the state of Washington get a phone call. The phone call is from a band member of Jim's. He's the bass player in the Bare Naked group, and he says that Jim has confessed to him, to the bass player, that he has killed this gentleman in the state of Washington. So Jim all of a sudden becomes on the radar, and so does Peggy Sue Thomas. They're called in for questioning, and they don't have too much on them, and their stories, Peggy Sue Thomas and Jim Hooton's stories, do not gel, surprisingly there, right? So they're let go, and Jim goes back to Punta Gorda. Well, the authorities collect a little bit more evidence and decide that they really want to press Jim, and they come down to Punta Gorda. Now, this is in mid-August of 2004, and if you remember, an important event happened in 2004. Friday, August 13th, Hurricane Charlie blew through Charlotte Harbor at 130 miles an hour, and Jim Hooton went about 130 miles out and tailed out of Charlotte County and ended up in Mexico, Veracruz, Mexico, about 2,000 miles away. And no one knows where he is. His wife knows where he is, but certainly the authorities have no idea. Now, when Jim gets to Veracruz, he grows his hair long, he changes his name, and he's still playing blues guitar.
Okay.
He keeps up with the music, which I guess is good.
Just a slightly different persona.
Exactly. Meanwhile, Peggy Sue, not being a slouch herself, has continued working as a glamorous limousine driver. She meets and marries an Alaska oil millionaire by the name of Mark Allen, who coincidentally in 2009 owns the winning horse for the Kentucky Derby, Mind That Bird, in 2009. That wins the Kentucky Derby in 2009. They get married. The marriage doesn't last, but Peggy Sue does get a nice divorce settlement, including a $500,000 houseboat in New Mexico, which she aptly names Off the Hook. Like, she's off the hook of the marriage, she's off of the hook of the murder.
Perfect.
Okay, so about 6 years later, this is in 2010, Jim Hutton's wife is still in Punta Gorda. Now, remember, Jim had sold that software program to Microsoft for over $1 million. Well, all that money is gone. Jim's computer business, gone. Everything. So she's running out of money. So she starts writing bad checks. And the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office really says to her, well, you're facing serious jail time. And she says, okay, I'll tell you where my husband, who's a fugitive, is. And the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office warrant squad is credited for providing information that led to Jim's arrest in Mexico. So they apprehend him in Veracruz, Mexico. And this is in 2012. So Jim, when he flees during Hurricane Charlie, which is August of 2004, he lives for a good 6 years in Mexico. And if his wife hadn't written bad checks, he may still be there today. However, he is brought back to Washington. There's a trial. The gun owner that sold Jim the gun in Washington verifies that Jim is, in fact, the purchaser of the gun, and it was purchased right before the murder of Russell Douglas. And then, interestingly, Jim gets 80 years, but he never incriminates Peggy Sue. He never states that she had a role in it. Now, Peggy Sue did get a couple of years for the charge of rendering criminal assistance. So she serves 2 years, of course. Jim gets 80 years, still serving that sentence. Douglas's wife, the murder victim's Brina, is never charged and for anything. She does collect not all the life insurance money, but some of it. But as karma would have it, the house that she purchases goes into foreclosure. So, so what was the motive for killing this guy? Because Jim Hooton never really met Russell Douglas. Jim was living in Punta Gorda and flying up for rendezvous with Peggy Sue, but this was Peggy Sue's friend's husband. So Jim not ever meeting Russell Douglas really doesn't have any clear motive other than the possibility of a conspiracy. If you look at Russell's wife Brenna, Peggy Sue, and Jim to kill Russell and split the life insurance money. Now, when Jim confessed to the bass player, he said that he killed Russell Douglas because his stepfather was abusive, and it was a way of getting back. Whether that's a motive or not, it will never really be clear, but certainly to find out about this person, Peggy Sue would have to play a big role in all this. And it's just unfortunate that these people had all this talent and all this success, and yet they chose a person to murder.
Yeah, pretty senseless.
Yeah. And interestingly, Anne Rule, the high priestess of true crime, has written a book called Practice to Deceive about this various murder case. It is in the Mid-County Library. You can check it out. Now, in her book, and I don't know if this is sexist or not, but she focuses more on the Peggy Sue Thomas character or person because she's a former beauty queen, and the way they kind of sell the story is this former beauty queen lures a man to his death. Jim Hooton is mentioned in the book, so is Punta Gorda, and he does play an important role in the book, but it certainly focuses more on Peggy Sue Thomas. And there's also a Lifetime movie.
Okay.
You know you're successful when you hit the Lifetime movie circuit.
Yeah.
And I first found out about it. I was watching one of the 48 hours, and they profile different murders, and I was half paying attention, and then they mentioned Punta Gorda. I'm thinking, Punta Gorda? What is this about? So it's just an amazing, unfortunate story, and shout out to the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office for playing a big role in apprehending Jim Hooton. So.
Yeah, it seems like Charlotte County becomes a part of different, homicide investigations over time, and they become helpful in, capturing, the killers.
I think that, this being a nice resort retirement area, that it wouldn't play a role in any of these murders, but from time to time, Punta Gorda is involved. You're right.
Well, we love to dig up the dark underbellies of history here in Charlotte County. And, a lot of these stories are interesting. Obviously, it's very sad. It's horrendous. But a lot of this really, it plays into different aspects of our history here. And just by looking at some of these stories, you can really get like a full-rounded history approach to what was
yeah.
really going on here in this area at any given point in time. And
Well, it's been a fascinating discussion about the Charlotte County homicides, and we thank you for taking the time to listen to these amazing stories.
yes, thank you. We'll see you next time.